America, land of the free, home of the brave, and occasional misunderstandings. The sounds of bustling crowds fill Liberty Square as Colin MacLeod takes in the sights. Liberty Square. Magnificent. Just like the guidebook said. Colin takes a photo, accidentally bumping into someone behind him. Oh, I'm terribly sorry about that. My fault entirely. Hey, watch where you're going, buddy. Yes, as I said, completely my fault. Sorry again. Canadian, huh? Figures. Indeed I am. Colin. MacLeod, pleasure to meet you. First time in Washington. Well, maybe in Canada you can walk around with your head in the clouds, but here in America, we pay attention. Right you are. I'll be more careful. You do that, and while you're at it, maybe lose the tourist getup. You're practically screaming. Rob me. I appreciate the concern for my safety, Sergeant. Brooks, Sergeant Dalton Brooks, and it's not concern, it's irritation. You people come here, clogging up our monuments, not knowing how to behave. I assure you, I meant no disrespect to your country or its landmarks. Save it. Just stay out of my way. Of course, again, I apologize for the inconvenience. You Canadians, and your apologies. It's pathetic. Colin's expression shifts almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something beyond politeness. He watches as Brooks storms away, shoving past an elderly couple without acknowledgement. Perhaps we'll meet again, Sergeant. Brooks, Colin murmurs to himself, adjusting his maple leaf cap. I do hope so. 2 hours later, Colin stands in line at the National Air and Space Museum, meticulously organizing his touring schedule in a small leather-bound notebook. The Wright brothers exhibit closes at 4, which gives me just enough time to see the Apollo mission displays first. Colin's methodical planning is interrupted by a familiar voice booming across the entrance hall. Move it along, folks. This isn't a social club. Sergeant Brooks strides through the lobby, apparently on some official business. He's not in full uniform, but his military bearing and the insignia on his casual jacket make his status clear. Colin observes quietly as Brooks bypasses the line, flashing credentials at security. Sir, please extend your arms for the security check. Do you know who I am? I'm here on official business. Protocol still requires a security check, sir. Unbelievable. I've served 3 tours while you've been standing around in this air-conditioned box. Colin watches as Brooks reluctantly complies, muttering loud enough for everyone to hear. This is what's wrong with America these days. No respect for the uniform. The security guard, maintaining professionalism, completes his check without comment. Colin reaches the front of the line. Good afternoon. Beautiful museum you have here. Thank you, sir. Arms extended, please. Of course, no trouble at all. Colin complies immediately, smiling warmly at the guard. Brooks, still lingering nearby, scoffs loudly. See that? Foreigners have no problem with being treated like criminals. They're used to it. Colin makes eye contact with Brooks, his smile unwavering. I believe it's called mutual respect, Sergeant. These fine people are just doing their jobs. Nobody asked for your input, Maple Leaf. I suppose not. But then again, nobody asked for yours either. Later that afternoon, Colin finds himself at E, the museum cafeteria, enjoying a coffee while reviewing his photos. The space is crowded with tourists and locals alike. Mind if I join you? All the tables are taken. An elderly gentleman stands beside Colin's table, tray in hand. Please, be my guest. Always room for one more. Thank you kindly. American hospitality isn't dead after all. I'm afraid I can't take credit for American hospitality. I'm Canadian. Well, that explains it then. They share a laugh as Sergeant Brooks enters the cafeteria with 2 other men in similar attire. Brooks immediately notices Colin. Look at that, boys. It's maple syrup from this morning. Making friends everywhere he goes. Colin nods politely but doesn't engage further. The elderly man looks between them, curious. Is there a problem, son? No problem, sir. Just noticing how some tourists think they own the place. Interesting. I've been sitting here 5 minutes and the only person acting entitled is you." Brooks' face darkens as he steps closer to their table. "What did you say, old man?" "I said you're being rude without cause. This young man has been nothing but courteous." "It's quite all right," Colin interjects smoothly. "The sergeant is likely tired from his important duties. Coffee, Sergeant? My treat." "I don't need your charity." "Not charity, just coffee, between neighbors." "We're not neighbors. You're a guest in my country. Remember that." "How could I forget when you're so determined to remind me? Though I must say, you're not exactly the welcoming committee I expected from the tourist brochures." Brooks leans in, lowering his voice. "You think you're clever, don't you? With your polite little jabs. I think manners cost nothing but mean everything. A lesson that transcends borders, Sergeant." The next day finds Colin at the Lincoln Memorial, standing reflectively before the massive statue. The morning is quiet, with only a handful of early visitors. Colin reads the inscriptions, notebook in hand. 77 years ago. He's interrupted by the sound of a commotion. At the bottom of the steps, Sergeant Brooks is aggressively confronting a young Asian tourist who appears confused. "English. Do you speak English?" The sign says no food. "No. Food," the tourist, clutching a water bottle, tries to explain. "Is only water, sir. No food. Don't get smart with me. You people come here with no respect for our rules." Colin watches. For a moment, then slowly descends the steps. "Excuse me, Sergeant Brooks. I believe there's a misunderstanding. Stay out of this, Canadian." "He's only carrying water, which is permitted. Perhaps you misinterpreted." "I know what I saw. He had food." The tourist shakes his head vigorously. "No food, only water. He's clearly telling the truth, Sergeant." "And who made you the authority? This is America, not your backwater." Colin's typically gentle expression hardened slightly. "I wasn't aware Canada qualified as a backwater. Fascinating perspective. You know what I mean." "I'm afraid I don't. But what I do know is that you're harassing an innocent visitor based on a misunderstanding. Rather than admit error, you're doubling down. Who do you think you're talking to? A man with authority he hasn't earned and respect he doesn't deserve." Brooks steps toward Colin, closing the distance between them. "Say that again." "I'd rather not. I said it perfectly the first time." A small crowd has gathered around the confrontation. The tension between Colin and Sergeant Brooks is palpable. "You're making a scene, Brooks. Is that what the uniform stands for these days?" Brooks glances around, suddenly aware of the audience they've attracted. Among them are 2 uniformed military personnel. "This doesn't concern any of you. Move along." "Actually," one of the uniformed men says, stepping forward, "it does concern us when you're representing the service this way. Lieutenant, with all due respect—" "Save it, Brooks. This isn't the first complaint." The lieutenant turns to the Asian tourist and Colin. "I apologize for this incident. We hold ourselves to higher standards." "No apology necessary," Colin responds. "I'm sure Sergeant Brooks was just having a difficult morning." Brooks stares at Colin with barely contained fury. "Don't patronize me." "I wouldn't dream of it, merely offering you a graceful exit." The lieutenant gives Brooks a stern look. "We should discuss this elsewhere. Now." As Brooks reluctantly follows, his superior, whispers spread through the gathered crowd. "Did you see how the Canadian stood up to him? About time someone called out that bully. I've seen that sergeant hassling people before." Colin, overhearing these comments, attempts to defuse the situation. "We all have our off days. Let's not judge too harshly." An older American woman approaches Colin. "That was brave of you. He's been throwing his weight around here all week." "Not brave, just right. There's a difference." "Well, where I come from, standing up to a bully is always brave. Where I come from, it's just being a good neighbor. We could use more neighbors, like you. Not all Americans are like him, you know." "I never thought they were. One person doesn't define a nation, neither the worst nor the best." That evening, Colin sits alone on a bench near the reflecting pool, the Washington Monument illuminated against the twilight sky. The day's events have left him thoughtful. Beautiful night. Colin looks up to find Sergeant Brooks standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets. Indeed it is. America knows how to put on a good show. We need to talk. I'm listening. Brooks sits on the bench, maintaining distance between them. You made me look like a fool today. You managed that entirely. On your own, Sergeant. I got reprimanded because of you. Written up. Because of your behavior, not my response to it. Brooks stares ahead, jaw clenched. You don't understand what it's like. Coming back home, seeing tourists treat monuments like amusement parks. Men died for this country. Canadians died alongside Americans in many wars. Respect isn't exclusive to nationality. Easy for you to say. Your country hasn't had to defend the free world. Is that what you think? That Canada has no sacrifices to honor? No graves to tend? It's not the same. Pain is pain, Sergeant. Loss is loss. The maple leaf stands for something too. You just don't get it. What I get is a man using his uniform as a shield and his service as an excuse. The true soldiers I've known carry their honor differently. Brooks turns, anger flashing in his eyes. What would you know about it? My father served in Afghanistan, alongside your troops. He came home with fewer limbs but more wisdom. He taught me that true strength isn't in intimidation, but in understanding. I don't need life lessons from a tourist. And yet, here we are. You followed me here for something. Brooks falls silent, internal conflict evident on his face. Maybe I just wanted to know why you didn't back down. Because some things matter, more than comfort, dignity, fairness, the same values your uniform is supposed to represent. Brooks stares at his hands, the anger slowly draining from his posture. They don't prepare you for coming back. 3 tours in combat zones, then suddenly you're supposed to direct traffic and give directions to tourists. Sounds like a difficult transition. I'm not making excuses. I'm not hearing any, just context. A silence stretches between them, oddly comfortable after days of tension. Your father lost limbs, left leg below the knee, 3 fingers on his right hand, and he doesn't hate the world for it? Some days he does, but most days he's grateful for what remains. Perspective is a choice, he says. Brooks nods slowly. Smart man. He has his moments. Another silence falls. When Brooks speaks again, his voice has lost its edge. My lieutenant has suggested I take some time off. Mandatory leave. Perhaps not the worst idea. Maybe not. Brooks stands, straightening his jacket. For what it's worth, I was out of line. With you, with that tourist, with a lot of people lately. Worth quite a bit, actually. Acknowledgement always is. Don't go thinking we're friends now, MacLeod. Wouldn't dream of it, Sergeant. But perhaps we're no longer enemies. I'd settle for respectful acquaintances. A diplomatic solution. Very Canadian of you. Brooks offers a grudging smile. I walked into that one. You did, but gracefully. Take care of yourself, MacLeod. Try not to start any international incidents. I'll do my best, though some might argue it's already mission accomplished. Dawn breaks over the National Mall as Colin prepares to leave Washington. He stands at the base of the Washington Monument, taking one last photo before his departure. Getting an early start? Colin turns to find Sergeant Brooks in running clothes, clearly in the middle of a morning jog. Last day. Wanted to see the sunrise here before I head north. Worth getting up for? Absolutely. Brooks seems different this morning. Lighter, somehow, as if a burden has shifted. I talked to my commander yesterday after our conversation. I'm starting a program next week. What kind of program? For veterans. Transition assistance. Turns out I'm not the only one struggling with the return to civilian interactions. Sounds like a good step. It's something. Better than taking it out on random Canadians. I don't know. I rather enjoyed our cultural exchange program. They share a genuine laugh, the first between them. I never asked what you do. Back in Canada. I teach conflict resolution at a university in Toronto. Brooks stares at Colin, then bursts into laughter again. You're kidding me? This whole time, I've been a case study? Not at all, though I admit the irony isn't lost on me. So all that patience and turning the other cheek stuff? Professional training, partly, but mostly just being Canadian. Brooks shakes his head, still smiling. You're something else, MacLeod. We all are, in our way. That's rather the point, isn't it? They stand in companionable silence, watching the morning light spread across the capital city. Safe travels home. Thank you, and good luck with your program. One more thing, MacLeod. When faced with aggression, how far would you really go to uphold your dignity? As far as necessary, but no further. The rest is just ego. I'll remember that. That was the idea.